welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 93. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are covering chapter 33 of Goblet of Fire, the Death Eaters.
Or, as we like to call it, Voldemort's burn book. So this chapter opens up with basically Voldemort emerges from his toasty warm bathtub of soup, and they're describing to us what he has become, which is less human than he was when he was mostly human.
Not baby Voldemort, real life Voldemort.
He's not unhuman in a baby Voldemort way, he's unhuman in a different way. So obviously they open up with talking about his nose, which is the two slits, like a snake. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, due to Horcruxes, he's kind of already part snake, if you think about it.
He possesses a lot of snakes, as we learn later on.
Exactly. And so, like, the snake thing makes a lot of sense to me. But then they talk about his fingers being long and spidery and him having cat eyes. And that feels kind of like, I know the author wants him to sound spooky and scary, but that seems really lazy, considering there's a lot of good reasons why he would have taken on some snake traits. And I just feel like it left me wanting for him to be described as spookier, but in a way where there's like a reason for each of the traits similar to the snake traits. So like, I wish maybe each changed appearance factor sort of related to one of the Horcruxes, for example. So like his skin could be thin and papery, kind of like the diary. He could have crown-like protrusions on his skull, kind of like the diadem. His fingers, if you want to describe them as weird, could be thin with large swollen knuckles, as if he were wearing rings underneath his skin. Maybe not the chalice so much, because like we don't need him out there with a perfect hourglass figure or anything. But like, I think it would have been really interesting, like next level foreshadowing, to have each of his features sort of correlate to something meaningful like that, rather than just like generic spooky.
Yeah, I feel like baby Voldemort sounded more gross and disturbing looking than full power Voldemort comes out looking at a snake nose and red eyes, and he's just white like a skull, is basically what they say. But the only thing I can really think about when reading this is the Harry Potter musical number where Voldemort does To Dance Again, and that's just stuck in my head.
That's fair. Yeah.
I will link it below if anyone has not seen it. If you're not seen the Harry Potter musical, just saying, you gotta watch it.
Yeah.
It's iconic. But Voldemort kind of gives a bit of backstory. He's kind of performing.
He's doing the classic villain bit. You do a nice monologue about your motives and your plans.
But he's giving Harry a bit of backstory about, like, you know, how he got to this point. And he's like, did you know that my father was a muggle, that my mother married, and he left us because he hated magic? But all I can think about is, like, Voldemort's mother actually kind of manipulated his father, because obviously he's under a love potion.
Kind of being the understatement of the decade.
Yeah.
She drugged the man.
Does Voldemort know that? Because, like, he says, like, oh, he left us. He left me and my mother for dead, and she died giving birth to me. And I'm like, well, he didn't really sign up for any of it.
Yeah, I don't think he knows that his mom used a love potion on his father. Like, I think he would still hate his father more because he was the muggle regardless, and Voldemort's not looking to, like, learn new information and change his opinion on his father. He's just looking to find more information to confirm his existing opinion, which is muggles are the worst. So he really wouldn't internalize any valuable information that justifies his father's behavior. But it's such a crime. It's so grimy. I can't believe she did that. That's brutal.
His father hated magic, but I mean, I feel like I would hate magic too if I was, like, you know, bewitched for, like, however long and, like, had a life that I didn't consent to.
And taken advantage of while under the influence of magic that I was unaware of. Yeah, it's disgusting. It's really gross.
But Voldemort refers to his Death Eaters as his family. And does he even know what a family is? Because seeing how he interacts with the Death Eaters, that's not a family. That's not how you talk to family. That's not how you act with family.
Even the family you don't like. Even, you know, Thanksgiving dinner with, you know, when the worst ones have opinions that are traumatizing. It's not that. No, I think he just uses it as a word to refer to close ties, even though for him it's not a communal back and forth close ties. It's very much a structured situation where everyone respects upward and he can disrespect downward. So he has no understanding of, like, an equal give and take collaborative relationship, so I don't think he could understand anything about family. He doesn't know the words, meaning he's misusing it, kind of.
Voldemort refers to a lot of just about being conquering death and the steps he's taken towards to conquering death, which obviously is a big foreshadowing hint towards the Horcruxes. And he mentions that kind of like they know the steps he took towards conquering death, but I don't really think the Death Eaters actually know about the Horcruxes. I feel like maybe the Lestranges knew a little bit about it, because obviously they went after Neville's parents.
Yeah, I mean, the Lestranges have to know a little bit as well, because he needed to express to them how important keeping the cup safe, for example, was. Like, they had an important role in it.
Yes. So I feel like they know kind of in vague terms that he was doing something to become immortal, but they don't know about the Horcruxes in general. I feel like that he kept that very close to his chest.
Yeah.
Because Voldemort doesn't trust other people, really.
Yeah, it's a liability. And I'm sure no Death Eater knew what all of the Horcruxes were. I'm sure no one but him did. You know, even his most trusted Death Eaters probably only knew about one or two of what they were. Like, okay, you've got a cup and a diadem or whatever. Everyone else, I'm sure, no one had enough information to single-handedly destroy his Horcruxes.
Yeah, I think if all the Death Eaters, we know that the Lestranges had the cup in their vault. And like Lucius had the diary, but I feel like in general the rest of them kind of didn't know. I think Sirius's brother knew obviously about the locket.
Yeah.
But it was very like not one person knew about all of them.
It was definitely one of those no one person can have the whole plan, therefore no one person has the power to ruin it situations.
Yes.
Speaking of dumb plans, the communication method that the Death Eaters use, you know, the sneaky evil terrorist organization, is just a full-on tattoo, like a visible tattoo on the arm. And I just think that's dumb. That's so, like, even when Hermione wants to have secret communications in the next book, she comes up with something that's less obvious and on your flesh and, like,
a bit better.
Really, especially because, like, tattoos, probably especially on, like, uppity, rich, whiny jerks like Lucius Malfoy, probably a shocking thing to see a tattoo on Lucius Malfoy when he gets out of the sauna at the expensive country club he must go to, I'm guessing. Like, you know, it just seems like a weird choice.
You would think that, like, why wasn't the Ministry, like, checking everyone for dark marks?
Seriously, like, it's an option. It seems very strange to me. But Harry's freaking out. You know, he's all tied up in the middle of the graveyard.
I mean, Harry's alternating between kind of like being, you know, in shock because he probably has PTSD from seeing Cedric die and Voldemort coming back to life.
And just like enjoying the show also kind of in a weird way. Like he's like, okay, should I clap at this part? Like Voldemort really is putting on a presentation.
Yeah, he's putting on a performance.
And so Harry's like a keen audience. He's like, I probably die at the end of this bit, but I need to know what's leading up to my death, so carry on.
It's funny because we talk about Barty Crouch Jr. as Fake Moody being such like an actor. The Voldemort's kind of like the director and
an eye for theatrics.
The ringleader, the master of it all. Yes.
Yeah, it's just funny that in these moments when Harry's terrified and he's seeing Voldemort come back to power, he's like, man, I wish the police would come. We should, you know, I hope the police show up. And it's just so funny because police is an entirely Muggle term. So basically, in this moment of fear and panic, Harry's like, just a couple Muggles with guns, that could sort this out, right? Right?
The funny thing is from last chapter too, we didn't really talk about this, but when baby Voldemort goes into, you know, the potion pot, Harry's like, please let it drown. Please let it die.
Wishful thinking. And part of Voldemort's monologuing that he's doing is just like listing off his Death Eaters by name as they show up, which is so funny. And I get that he thinks Harry's definitely 100% gonna die, but it's just so goofy to be like, these are my secret undercover, nobody knows because they're not in jail, so they got away with it, crime friends. I shall address you by name. Like, goofy. Yes, McNair and Avery and Malfoy. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's more kind of like, that's for the reader to kind of know. And it's a lot of the names we're getting is people that like we know are.
Yeah, McNair was the executioner who tried to kill Buckbeak.
And also like Avery was mentioned in the Pensieve kind of memories. Like, there are people that we kind of know are Death Eaters.
Yeah, it's just like Harry's in his mind making a mental list of all these names, and he's like, all right, I guess I'll just go home and report their asses, right?
The bad thing is that, like, he does report who they are, and Fudge is like, I can't hear. I can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry, I have a whole loaf of bread in my ear. Could you repeat that?
But I was just thinking, so obviously all these Death Eaters start appearing, and poor Wormtail, I guess, I mean, is he poor Wormtail? I mean, part of me feels bad for him, part of me doesn't feel bad for him. But Wormtail's, just crying in a corner because he cut off his hand. And he's just chilling there. It's actually kind of a miracle that he doesn't bleed out.
Yeah.
They don't have a tourniquet or anything. But Voldemort's just kind of gaslighting Wormtail, being like, you deserve this.
You did the best of everybody, but it still wasn't enough, so you should suffer anyway. Really not inspiring the masses there.
Voldemort's just kind of like, you were a coward, so it doesn't really count that you kind of brought me back to life. You deserve at least 13 more years of being just treated like dirt.
It's interesting though, the foreshadowing, because when Voldemort does give Wormy his new hand, he says very specifically, may your loyalty never fail. And we know, as people who've read the seventh book, that the moment that loyalty fails, the hand turns on Wormtail. And it's so he basically told him, he's like, hey, if you change your mind about me, this hand will kill you. He almost flat out says it. And it's so interesting how kind of blunt and obvious it is with the hindsight of what happens.
And we had a lot of foreshadowing about Wormtail and the debt he owes Harry. So I feel like it was always foreshadowed that Wormtail was going to at some point have to give his life up to Harry because he owes him. And that is kind of it comes back in Deathly Hallows, obviously, where Harry's like, you owe me. And the hand senses that, I guess, subconscious guilt or wavering that Wormtail has in that moment where he hesitates for just a moment and the hand turns on him. So I feel like because Wormtail's always referred to as a coward and he's only there because he's too afraid to face the consequences of his actions, and Voldemort knows that and he takes advantage of that.
Voldemort really is such a classic villain in this chapter. He's just listing all of his allies, the giants, the Dementors, just classic silly villain trope. And then he talks about 3 of the missing Death Eaters. Specifically, he said one is too much of a coward to be here, which I think is Karkaroff. He says one he believes to have left his service forever, which I think is Snape. And then there's one he refers to as his most loyal servant, which I interpret to be obviously Barty Crouch Jr., who's done a lot of work on this plan. He really sort of carried the team. Wormy made soup, but Barty's been in disguise undercover for months. He had to teach students,
Yeah, he had to deal with students and their problems. As a teacher, that's a lot of work. I think also it's trying to set up to us, maybe make us think that Snape is bad, because at this point we know that he was a Death Eater. Dumbledore does not give any concrete evidence or suggestions why he trusts him now. We only have Dumbledore's word. And Voldemort says, my most faithful servant is currently at Hogwarts. And at this time, we would never question Mad-Eye Moody because we think it is Mad-Eye Moody. And we're like, well, who do we know that's there at Hogwarts that is suspicious?
Yeah.
And Karkaroff's obviously a contender, but we think he's obviously too cowardly to return. That seems like Karkaroff. So who else is in Voldemort's circle or was in Voldemort's circle that is suspicious? And you think Snape.
I mean, I would never, but I can see how the rest of people would. I also think it's interesting because, given how we know he's not talking about Snape as his most loyal in this one, that means that he basically acknowledges in this moment that Voldemort thinks Snape has left him forever. And I bet Snape had to do such a clever bit of manipulating to get Voldemort to trust him again. I would have loved to have been able to seen him lying and convincing and reassuring in such a way that regained him that trust from Voldemort.
Yeah, I don't like Snape, but you gotta give him he probably had to really kind of manipulate Voldemort, because we do know that after everything happens, Dumbledore does send Snape back to go see Voldemort to get back to go undercover. And we don't really know what happens in that situation, but Voldemort does take him back into the inner fold. So obviously he believes him.
And I just really love how, while revealing his plan in detail, Voldemort finds time to just roast his followers. It really is just a full-on Death Eater burn book.
Yep.
Snape, he pretty much just says, oh, nastiest skank bitch I've ever met. Do not trust him.
Note from the editor, this is Tori here. This is a direct quote from the burned book in the movie Mean Girls. The podcast knows that Voldemort is unlikely to use the term skank bitch. Though the term would not wholly be shocking to come from the author.
Follow-up note from the edit. We would also like to note that canonically, Snape is very unskanky and really more of a yearner. So as we carry on with Voldemort's burn book, he calls Karkaroff a coward. He basically refers to Wormtail as a shitty, incompetent wizard who is also a coward and a rat.
Is a rat.
He refers to Lucius as slippery, petty, and unfaithful.
Yes.
Basically refers to Crabbe and Goyle as being shitty. It's particularly interesting to me that the most common insult is coward. And I don't think it's because Voldemort values bravery. I think it's more so that he's keenly aware that even when the Death Eaters do what he wants, it's most frequently out of fear and not loyalty. So I bet that knowledge is something that he's sort of insecure about, because the only people he compliments, the Lestrangers and the Crouches, are sort of the only ones that are actually loyal to the cause and committed to it, rather than just saving their own asses or maintaining personal wealth or power.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of see that sort of Machiavellian aspect where, like, they say it's Machiavelli specifically says it's better to be feared than loved if you can only be one of the two. But like, fear is such a short-term motivator, and it's always going to be based on the most present fear at the time. So when Voldemort wasn't present and he was in hiding, the most current fear for everyone who's motivated by fear is the prosecution and judgment in prison that they would face from like the Ministry of Magic or Dumbledore. So he has to be aware that if he's only got them because they're afraid of him, the moment they're more afraid of something else, he no longer has them and it's temporary. And that's got to be something you're really sensitive of and keenly aware of.
There are gaps in like his circle where he notes that some people have been killed or in prison. Obviously, the Lestrangers are in prison, but I feel like most of like the deep followers that really believe in the cause in their bones are either in prison or dead at this point, and the ones they have left are the ones that kind of believe in the cause, but they don't really want to do what's necessary for the cause. Like Lucius is there because he believes that he's superior, but he doesn't want to like get his hands dirty.
Yeah, he doesn't want to have to do anything about it. And I'm sure a bunch of them just like kind of don't care that much at all about whether or not Muggleborns have rights and stuff. They just want to stay rich and not be killed by Voldemort, and that is their only motivation to do anything for him ever. Just huge chunks of people who are on Voldemort's side so they can do business dealings with Lucius Malfoy or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's such a level of smarmy self-preservation.
I think a lot of them were probably that were kind of like Lucius, where they were kind of like old money, old purebloods, were kind of like believed in the initial cause, but now they're kind of stuck where they kind of don't want, they feel like the output isn't really worth their time, but they're stuck because they've already committed. As Voldemort says, they swore eternal loyalty to him, so.
Except like, theoretically everyone dies except Voldemort in his mind, so like, just like, they can't commit. You can have eternal, like, things, but no one else can, because like you're not letting them live forever too. It's just so goofy, but it's interesting to see how much he mentions cowardice, and I wonder if that's one of his fears, the idea that when he's not around, someone is scarier than him and he'll lose any control he has over the people that are there just because of fear.
Yeah, big part that Voldemort monologues a lot. This whole chapter is basically him just monologuing and explaining things. He explains kind of the backstory of how Harry, thwarted him the last 3 times and how it was like, a happy accident.
How embarrassing.
And he's just like, whatever, I know better now. And the biggest thing he talks about is how he used Harry's blood to become himself at full power, which means that obviously he can touch Harry and Harry doesn't really like injure him now because of Lily's protection, because now he has that as well.
It's basically a vaccine. He basically vaccinated himself against Lily's magic by giving himself a small dosage of that thing that carries the magic.
That is actually so true.
He literally is like, he might be an asshole, but at least he respects doctors and vaccinations.
He respects science in a way.
That's literally what he did.
I wonder what this does for, like, the connection, because we know that when Harry brings this up to Dumbledore, he kind of has a gleam of triumph at the fact that, like, Harry and Voldemort are now kind of converged because of the blood he took. But Harry's already a Horcrux at this point, So I'm kind of thinking, like, what does this mean for their connection that they already have?
Yeah.
So I was looking back to the prophecy where Voldemort obviously...
Already marked Harry as his equal.
Yeah, he marked Harry as his equal because he gave him the scar and he went after him. And it does talk about neither can live if the other survive. So does that bring up the fact? Because I feel like if Harry's a Horcrux, he's supposed to survive, so Voldemort survives. So does Voldemort taking his blood kind of bring up the fact that, like, now it's either one or the other?
Or maybe we always assume marked as his equal is the scar because it was marked, but that was in no way Voldemort respecting Harry or acknowledging Harry as something. He was just trying to kill him the same he would try to kill someone else.
That's true.
Perhaps the thing that actually was the act of Voldemort marking Harry as his equal was taking Harry's blood, because he wouldn't take anyone who hates him's blood. He specifically wanted Harry's blood because Harry had thwarted him, because people saw Harry as his number one, like, pillar blocking his success. So, like, maybe this is the moment where, like, yes, Harry was a Horcrux, but this is when he's marked as an equal.
This is the first time Harry and Voldemort have really gone face to face, with Voldemort at full power, fully, realized. And at the end of this chapter, Voldemort actually releases Harry and is like, we are going to duel, like, basically like gentlemen.
Because he didn't want to just kill him tied up. He wanted to prove that he was better than Harry.
Yeah.
But the fact that he thought he needed to prove it adds to the fact that he thought there was a level of equality there. And it says a lot too, because he shows Harry despite the fact that Harry's still just a 14-year-old boy. Like, he could have said, obviously, my biggest, like, enemy is Albus Dumbledore because he won't let me kill Harry Potter, and he's Albus Dumbledore. So, like, get me that guy. I need to kill him for this. But he chose Harry over Albus Dumbledore in this moment. You know what I mean? Which is saying a lot, because, again, Harry's 14.
And so many times he's always choosing Harry. Like, he chose him over Neville. He chose him no matter what. And it's kind of like, I feel like him choosing Harry's blood just kind of, like, really cements that Harry is now. Prophecies kind of, like, become real because Voldemort made it.
It's literally written in blood. Yeah. It was written in scar tissue, and now it's also written in blood.
Voldemort's kind of put on a show this entire chapter. He's monologuing. He's just being very dramatic, very theatrical.
He's na-na-na-boo-booing. Everyone thought you were better than me. Well, look at you now, tied up in a cemetery.
And this is kind of what his downfall is, like, the ego he has, where he has to, like, prove to all these Death Eaters that Harry Potter is nothing, and the only reason that he's defeated him these last 3 times has been because Dumbledore or so-and-so had helped him, or it's luck. It's just happenstance. But he doesn't just... He keeps monologuing, and he had Harry tied up. And Harry's, like, injured. He had just, his leg got injured. He saw his friend die. He doesn't have his wand. Like, Harry's completely vulnerable at this moment. Also, Harry's 14. So, like, Voldemort has all the advantages here, but he releases the advantages he has because he believes that he's better.
He wants the respect that comes along with beating someone in what they see as a fair fight, He
falls into, like, the classic villain archetype where, like, they monologue and they believe that they're better, that they have the advantage, and so they kind of, like, lose a bit of themselves. They get a bit too cocky.
Yep.
And so he releases Harry and it's like, you know what, we're gonna do, like, a proper duel because obviously I am better and I'm gonna win. There's no way I can lose. And then obviously Harry sneaks away, and Voldemort wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, he was like, that's not an option. Duel. I've challenged you to a duel, and as a respectable gentleman, you have to accept. And Harry's like, I'm 14 and I don't know what you're talking about.
He's like, what the fuck is going on?
He's like, once again, as I said earlier this year, I did not sign up for this. I would like to be excluded.
I'd like to be excluded from this narrative.
Thank you.
Voldemort doesn't think like that. And it's just kind of embarrassing to think that Voldemort spent this whole year planning to get Harry Potter alone to murder him. And Harry just, like, just like, bye!
He's like, great work with the planning and stuff. You forgot the fact that I did not sign up for this. It's like, literally just like, nope.
But do you have any final remarks for this chapter before we wrapped up?
I mean, I just think it's really funny. Like, Voldemort is such a dick to all his followers, They don't even have, and they're so uncomfortable around him, they're not even celebrating. Like, they're not even dancing and high-fiving.
They're like, oh, you're back. I am so happy.
Meanwhile, they're like peeing themselves. Like, what kind of mood is he in? What kind of mood is he in?
Like the kind of like awkward, like walk on eggshells. Like if you have like a really terrible roommate and you're just kind of like, I don't know what mood they're going to be in when they're in the kitchen. And I'm like, I'm just so happy to talk to you and everything's great. But you're just like, trying to kind of suss out how they're feeling.
Yeah, they're all terrified. They're like, they all know, they were like, he's dead. Oh well, go about our lives. We don't actually care about him as an individual. And the cause is we have bigger things to worry about. It's like a side quest for us. We have our own lives and finances to worry about and stuff. And now they have to be like, oops, I need to like talk my way out of the last like 14 years of minding my own business and be like, no, I was missing you the whole time. Just eating Ben and Jerry's ice cream and crying every night.
Exactly. Yes, but the next kind of big thing is obviously this big Harry and Voldemort show off, which has also been kind of like a big turning point of the series, as Harry at this point has kind of faced off about Voldemort, but not really directly with Voldemort because he wasn't in full power.
Yeah.
So this is like kind of the first of the many big show-offs leading into like kind of the last show-off that Harry and Voldemort have. But thanks for listening to this episode of Potter Revisited, and we'll be back next time to discuss chapter 34, Priori Incantatem. I know how to speak Italian.
Latin.
That's what I meant. Latin, of course, obviously.
I know how to speak Italian. You have to keep that in.
But if you have any questions or thoughts about today's episode, you can email us at potterrevisitedpodcast@gmail.com or message us on social media at potterrevisited. And as always, our podcast is available on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.